She didn't know what we know, that she was becoming something permanent and necessary as an astrological sign. Right now. Yes. No. Wait. Yes. Right now. My mother. The San Francisco Chronicle, one Twofer's View weekly column. Histories and their stories. It is generally believed that the dramatic growth in the conjoined twin population worldwide was caused by radioactive fallout. The assertion is supported statistically by the distribution, both temporal, mid-20th century, and geographical, advanced industrial nations, of the first wave of births. However, it is not supported by lab results. Researchers abusing pig ovaries as if on a personal vendetta have produced many porcine prodigies. Eyeless, brainless, legless meatloaves, so-called popcorn pigs, their organs on the outside. The high IQ strain employed at airports to sniff out drug mules. And the celebrated big pig of Pahrump, size of a juvenile hippo, whom pork interests were hoping to breed for meat, and who was tragically assassinated despite the vigilance of an armed guard by a junta of cattlemen. But scientists have produced no mutation so common, so consistent, so successful as Homo sapiens dicephalus. Consequently, some groups like the Siamists, Togetherists, and so-called fusion theologists aver that radiation has nothing to do with twinning. It was a deeper, more metaphysical split that took place when the first nuclear bomb was exploded at the Trinity site on July 16, 1945. Many consider this split no accident, but the essential next step in the spiritual evolution of a species finally advancing beyond self-interest. To others, it's just the latest fissure in that ever-widening crack in the relation of self to world, whose warning signs first appeared in ancient Greece. Revisionist scholars, on the other hand, claim that a sizable population of twofers has existed throughout history, their story, many more that were sung in ballads and broadsides. Indeed, the Togetherists, the most radical of the fusion groups, claim an antiquity that rivals the Masons. Twofer artisans controlled the smithies of Roman Britain, they believe. Not only that, anyone using a chain for any purpose had to pay an annual tax to the Togetherists. This tax, an early form of copyright, for the twofers were generally believed to have invented the chain, though this remains to be proved, was collected throughout Europe during the reign of the Holy Roman Empire and played a part in preserving twofers, then considered monsters, against poverty, persecution, and the indignity of public display. In Egypt and the Middle East, twofers were traditionally associated with the priesthood rather than the artisan classes, but again, their emblem is the linked rings of a chain. In fact, according to Togetherists, any representation of a chain, whether in poetry or art, heraldry or history, is a coded reference to a secret society, which, if they are correct, is vast indeed. Whether inducts to a secret society or no, these often high-functioning twofers led productive lives, concealing their condition from all but intimates. Just a few of the historical figures alleged to have had conjoined twins are Copernicus, Shakespeare, Emperor Rudolph II, Meister Eckhart, Eric Gill, Joseph Venn, Robert Louis Stevenson, Victoria Woodhull, and Mark Twain. Galileo has only lately been removed from this list. A recently unearthed tailor's bill for a shirt showed an insufficiency of linen and only one collar button. Nora goes to England following the trail, the scent of the Unity Foundation, which takes her at one point to a medical museum that really exists and is more or less as I've described it here. The Royal College of Surgeons, said the cabbie, pulling to the curb outside a long spear-topped fence. Behind it, square in the middle of the facade, 6 two-story ionic columns guarded the small entrance. I had to walk the length of the fence to find a way around it. Inside the door, a receptionist waved me on into a creamy marble hall where antique notables in gold frames ruminated over a fire extinguisher. It took a moment to spot the small sign for the Hunterian Museum on the side of some stairs leading up. The museum had grown up around a core collection of medical specimens assembled by the illustrious surgeon John Hunter, born in 1728, who had treated the young Byron for clubfoot, owned such exotic animals as porcupines and bats, and acquired through dubious channels the skeletons of both the largest and the littlest persons of his day, the Irish giant and the Sicilian fairy. Hunter was a speculative fellow who once transplanted a human tooth into a coxcomb and injected himself with infected pus from a syphilitic whore, both experiments proving fatal to the subject. The Hunterian was lushly carpeted in institutional gray, and its glass cases were widely spaced and orderly. Within, forlorn widgets, the yellowish hue of old vellum coiled in glass jars. On close inspection, many of these proved parts of people. A diseased colon, an elephantine thumb. I browsed them with a frank and systematic attitude. I admired the nose made for a woman who had lost hers to syphilis, a pink-painted silver shell soldered to wire glasses frames to hook over the ears. Her new husband liked her better without the nose, so she donated it to the museum. Altogether a happy story. An array of fetal skeletons of graduated sizes, arranged against black velvet, seemed a sort of evolutionary chart for changelings, how a pixie might become a human child. A series of slant-topped vitrines were covered with thick velvet drapes to protect their fragile contents from the light. I lifted one to see a page of handwritten laboratory notes accompanying a sepia line drawing of a Y-shaped tubule wreathed with delicate filaments and peppered all over with lowercase letters, tethered to scrawled Latin names. I raised the next curtain, and a postcard that had been sandwiched between the velvet and the glass skated out and tapped me in the chest. It bore a disagreeable photograph of a monkey with a riding crop astride a bridled goat. Both had the glassy stare of the dead. I turned it over. The yellowing reverse was blank except for the legend in tiny print, "Monkey riding goat." Circa 1870s, Potter's Museum of Curiosities, Arundel, West Sussex. I pocketed it, then on an afterthought bent over the vitrine. The dainty volume inside lay open to a page explicating Hunter's discovery that the free marten, a sterile cow that mounts other cows, always had a male twin. Frowning, I dropped the curtain and turned away, and saw it. One bizarrely stretched skull. No, two skulls fused together, like calcified soap bubbles. Not a twofer then, and what's more, the second head was upended on the crown of the first, and a stump of a neck jutted upward, where a whole second body should have been. There was a glint of light in one eye socket. It almost looked like an eye, moist, shiny, regarding me from inside the skull. My heart lurched. I stared back, I hardly know how long. Finally, I dared to step forward. As I did, the pale point of light grew, slid and rippled and split in two around a flaw in the glass. I recognized my own reflection and laughed, relief warming my cheeks. I was the scariest monster there. I bent to read the plaque. The creature had been born in 1783 in Mundal Gate, Bengal, to poor parents. There should have been a second body. It was speculated that it had received insufficient nourishment in the womb and never developed, or perhaps it had been destroyed afterward, since the appalled midwife had thrown the newborn in the fire. Who could blame her, I thought. His mother had dragged him out, treated his burns, and exhibited him to great acclaim. He was killed by a cobra at 5. I was turning away when I heard a hiss behind me. I turned back. I remember a shelf wedged across the window, the lower skull said, moving its teeth out of sync. I dropped back a pace, and the vitrine caught me in the small of my back. The window was an irregular rectangle cut in the corrugated wall, said the upper, with 2 pieces of bottle glass wedged in it, one emerald green, one milky and swirled as a shell. I thought they were divinely beautiful. I begged for the blanket to be lifted, to afford us a glimpse of them. Sometimes she did lift it, but sometimes she'd give us the stick, they whispered. It was actually the handle of a spade, occasionally used for poking the fire, hence the charred end, but more often for poking him through the bars. I mean the blanket, they rasped. Sorry.